Okay, good morning to those of you who are still with us or just joining. We're very happy to have you here for our next session. We're still waiting for one panelist who might come in. That's Frank Gareth, but I will keep an eye and elevate him as he comes in. In any case, everybody's very welcome to this discussion session on The Price is Right, Unpacking Farmers' Perceptions of Seed Affordability. I'm very happy now to hand over to my colleague, Gareth Borman, who will moderate this session for us. Gareth, very welcome. Reminder to unmute. And there you go. Enjoy.
Great. Thank you, James. And good day, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I want to just give you a quick introduction as to what to expect today. We will be sharing with you two presentations, followed by a panel discussion. And joining the panel are Astrid Mastenbroek, who is a PhD fellow at Wageningen University Department of Development Economics. Christine Joyce-Adong, who is currently an agribusiness coordinator with the GSST Uganda program in Uganda. And we're hoping also that Frank Kagoda, who works for the National Agricultural Research Organization in Uganda, that he will also be joining us shortly. The topic of the session today is The Price is Right, Unpacking Farmers' Perceptions of Seed Affordability. I'll be providing a short presentation to try and introduce some of the concepts of cognition, beliefs, and heuristics, some important concepts that will be discussed here today, after which Astrid will take over from me and will be presenting some of the research aims for Uganda on unpacking farmers' perceptions of seed affordability. Right, let's get started. James, if you can please advance to the next slide. And yes, as I mentioned, I'll start off with a bit of an introduction to some key concepts. James, you can go to the next slide. All right, so firstly, a question. How does your brain perform? Is it as quick as a hare or as steady as a tortoise? You can go to the next slide. To put this to the test, I'd like for you to answer a question. There are lilies on a lake. Each day, the amount of lilies doubles. After 20 days, the lake is covered. After how many days was half the lake covered? Can you please provide your answers in the chat? And while you do that, James, you can advance the slide. Tell me which line is longer, the line above or the line below? And James, you can keep advancing the slides. What you will see is that, again, in actual fact, James, next slide, the two lines are identical in length. And I'm just watching the chat feed to see if anyone has an answer to the first question. I'm still waiting for our winner, who will be the quickest to answer. All right, you can show the answer, James. Next slide. If you said 19, like who have we got here? Just struggling to read your answer. Well, anyway, the first person to come up with the answer 19 is correct. Since the number of lilies doubles each day, half the lake will be covered one day before being entirely covered. Okay, we've got some smart attendees today. When I was asked this question, I answered 10, which was a little bit of too quick arithmetic on my side. If you go to the next slide, James. So in actual fact, our brain and our cognition is comprised of two systems. The one is as quick as the rabbit and mostly involves intuition. It acts as a reflex and is mostly effortless. The second is steady as the tortoise, and it involves concentration and effort by applying reason and logic. Next slide. What we know is that we're actually capable of thinking both fast and thinking slow. So we apply both systems 1 and 2 in our cognition. And this is what researchers Kahneman and Tversky have contributed to the School of Behavioral Economics, which challenges the idea that people are generally rational and make rational decisions based on, say, supply and demand and price. human irrationality and cognitive biases lead to systematic errors in our judgment. So sometimes these cognitive shortcuts that we take, a bit of our intuition and the heuristics we apply as rules of thumb are biases that lead to incorrect judgments. If you go to the next slide. A specific theory of cognitive psychology is that of attribution theory, which I'd like to introduce today. Attribution theory talks about two different types of attributes that we can apply. Well, three to be precise, but in this case, I want to talk about intrinsic and extrinsic attributes. Intrinsic attributes are attributes of seed, in this case, that are physical, such as its uniformity and its germination. They might be visible or invisible, like the cases of uniformity and germination. Extrinsic attributes include its relationship with society, so more social relations. An example is the trust we have in the seed source, and price is another good example that we use as an extrinsic cue. Both intrinsic and extrinsic, or physical and social, attributes are used as heuristics of seed quality or seed value. Heuristics are these common features of our intuition. They can be seen as anecdotal to rules of thumb, general experiences that we apply to make shortcuts in our judgment. Next slide, James. So we went about researching farmers' beliefs in Malawi about seed and seed quality, and included a number of hypotheses, among which were the greater the farmer's product knowledge, and in this case of seed, the less they rely on social cues for quality. What the literature tells us is that an expert on a specific product is less likely to apply extrinsic cues or social cues to judge quality, and are more likely to look at actual physical features of the product because of their familiarity with it. So most people will generally judge the quality of a bottle of wine by its price, but the true sommeliers among us will be able to use much more physical features of its quality to give a judgment of that quality. The second hypothesis we tested was that women farmers have more product knowledge than men. And this came from our suspicion that they have a greater, because of task division in the household and the community, they have a greater role in grading, selecting, and maintaining seed quality. Next slide. We used structural equation modeling for determining this, and what that does essentially is it measures the relationships between variables in a system, a hypothetical system, in this case, a belief system. We used experiments to measure farmers' beliefs that attributes were present, okay, such as its uniformity, its color, its size, its germination, or its source and its price, and whether that seed was of quality or not. So we measured the relationship between the beliefs that certain attributes were present and the belief that the seed was of quality. Farmers were shown bags of seed treated for uniformity, and go to the next slide. Also photographs of the source of that seed. So they were shown some information from which they could scan for certain attributes, not all, and we measured their presumption that other attributes were featured on the basis of what they could see. So it measures the relationship between different beliefs and also the belief in quality. Next slide. Without going into too much detail on the results and the statistical analysis thereof, what I would like to tell you is that preliminarily we have concluded that farmers believe that seed that is physically pure, bright in color, plump, from a trusted source, and high in price is high in quality. And this pertains to farmers in rural parts of Malawi that were relatively uneducated and illiterate, and their judgments pertaining to groundnut and soybean. Farmers demonstrated high and low product knowledge alike. So farmers who did demonstrate what we determined as high or low product knowledge based on other variables we measured, rely on these heuristics, the same heuristics, and attribute quality similarly. So this actually refutes our first hypothesis that the greater the product knowledge, the less likely they are to rely on extrinsic cues. They rely on extrinsic and intrinsic cues, and there's no significant difference between those that were that demonstrated high or low product knowledge. What we also concluded was that the belief that seed is from a trusted source is the most important heuristic for quality. So if farmers believed that the seed came from a reliable source or a reputable source, they also believed that it would therefore be of high quality. And there were no significant differences in the way that men and women attribute quality, which also surprised us. So we refuted the second hypothesis as well. All right, James, you can go to the next slide, which I believe is also the final slide of my presentation. That gives a bit of an introduction to farmers' beliefs, farmers' cognition, and the heuristics that they apply. And I'd now like to hand over to Astrid, who will talk about her research aims for Uganda.
Thank you, Gareth. And I'm sorry, I just need to interject rather quickly before Astrid, you get started. I just want to talk to Josiah in the audience. Josiah, please take a look at the chat. There's a message there for you to head to a different session. Please take a look there and off you go. Okay, thanks. Astrid, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Gareth, for introducing the topic. And James, you can go to the next slide. So Gareth introduced our mental system on how we think, how we make shortcuts, mental shortcuts, as well as when we analyze things further. He has also already shown some examples from Malawi on how we take, farmers also take mental shortcuts to assess products. So the second part of the presentation is about Uganda and maize and unpacking perceptions of seed affordability. Next slide. So the research started in 2018 under the NWO CCAF's research grant to look at promoting drought-tolerant maize varieties in Uganda, whereby we saw that there's a general low adoption of drought-tolerant maize varieties, particularly hybrid ones. And over the years, but also during my work with the Integrated Seed Sector Development Program in Uganda, when we speak to farmers, many times they say the seed is expensive or unaffordable. Those are the words which are commonly used. However, when you dig a bit deeper, we find out some of the thought processes which also led us to the research questions that we wanted to look at. Next slide. So why is it important to look into the perception of seed is expensive? It's an easy word, so the first reaction would be, oh, we need to make the seed cheaper. But is it really the price that is the problem? Or is it more perception? So what are the implications of farmers thinking seed is expensive? Well, first of all, they continue to use home-saved seed and grain from the local markets, resulting generally in lower yields. Secondly, we also see many times that, especially in Uganda, under the cluster subsidy program, that farmers receive seed for free or at a subsidized price. But then when the prices increase, they're not willing to purchase the seed at the full cost. And why is this important? Is also to develop a healthy seed sector. The team of the conference is governing seed sector development. You need sufficient turnover also for seed companies to develop a healthy business, as well as invest in their own research and development. So these are some of the implications of a simple statement that seed is expensive. Next slide. So when we unpack affordability barriers, we come to 4 possible explanations about these perceptions. Farmers are worried that the investment does not cover production costs. So we look at risk aversion. Farmers fear that they lose the capital that they invested because they have to buy the seed, they have to buy possibly also the fertilizer that comes along with it. Farmers genuinely don't have the money to buy the seed, so a capital or liquidity constraint. And what we're going to look into now is that farmers may actually take the maize grain as a reference point to determine their willingness to pay for the maize grain, which is a concept called anchoring. So the first 3 possible explanations have been much more researched in the past, and under different circumstances we find some level of evidence of the first 3 possible explanations, yet it doesn't explain the full story. So we want to dig deeper into the anchoring. Next slide. So as Garrett also explained, if we don't know the quality or the product and we are using it for the first time, or if we don't know how to assess value to it, we take some initial value in mind and then adjust our thinking either upward or downward. So for example, you can if you're going to buy this wine that Garrett was talking about, you may be used to the supermarket price. So when you see a bottle of maybe 50 euros or dollars, you may think that is really expensive because you start from your $3 bottle that you normally buy in the supermarket. So when that happens, and you don't fully complete this conscious, the tortoise thinking, the slow thinking on adjusting the value of the product, because either you don't know the full price, the value to it, or the way it looks like. The labels may be almost identical, so you feel it has the same value as your supermarket bottle. So then typically the adjustment is insufficient and is biased towards the initial value, which is called an anchor or reference point or a benchmark. So people tend to accept and rely on the first piece of information they receive before making a full decision on willingness to pay or value. So this piece of information is called the reference point or the anchor. So there's some famous research done on it, quite a lot. So you both have your intrinsic anchors like the bottle of wine example, but also if I tell you the number 20 3 times over, and then I ask you the length of the river Nile, for example, you will give me a lower answer than if I had mentioned 20,000 a number of times over to you. So this works in the same type. Next slide, please. So when we look at particularly maize, but it applies to any type of cereal or legume, whereby the seed, as you can see in the small picture, looks exactly the same as the grain. So in this case, a hybrid seed has a price of 8,000 Ugandan shillings, yet the grain is sold for 600 shillings. So this anchor in this case is the maize grain. And then if we dig a bit deeper, you see no difference in the grain price, but also in the recycled seed or the potential seed, because farmers can plant grain for seed. So there's also no difference in the grain price for seed produced from recycled seed or home-saved seed or hybrids. And it's hard to distinguish the 2 products because they look exactly the same. So it's very hard for farmers to define a willingness to pay to it if they don't have the full experience with it. So this is like the hypothesis on part of the explanation why farmers are not willing to pay the full price for drought-tolerant maize varieties, but it applies to beans as well, and even for seed producers, Christine may highlight later as well. Next slide. So basically, this comes to kind of the research questions that we are want to further explore. So what drives farmers' perception of affordability and the value of seed itself? And do farmers use maize grain as a benchmark to decide on how much they're willing to pay for hybrid drought-tolerant maize varieties? So this is the framing for the discussion that we'll be having. Thank you. I don't think there's a next slide. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Astrid. Yeah, really interesting stuff indeed. I would like to perhaps kick things off now with an audience poll. James, would you mind running the first audience poll that we prepared? The question is, do farmers lack the money or the motivation, or let's say conviction, to pay for quality seed? And the choices are money, motivation, other, or I don't know. Please enter your answer now. Christine, welcome back. It was lovely having you here yesterday. Christine, I'd like to pose the first question to you. Please, if you can, just unmute yourself, and if your bandwidth can handle it, maybe just put the video on. Are smallholder farmers convinced of the value of using quality seed? What returns on investment do you think they expect?
Hello, good day, everyone. My name is Christine. Yeah, basing on the question that
Christine, I'm going to just disable your video, or ask that James does. Sorry, I was a bit too optimistic.
Yeah, I've turned off the video now.
had asked. Yeah, farmers are really convinced. They keep. Okay, let me also turn mine off. So what I was saying is, yeah, to a good extent, farmers are actually convinced about the value of quality seed. But the issue is they keep complaining that seed is expensive. When they they compare the price of seed and then how much they are actually going to sell in terms of the grain. Yeah, so I would say to a great extent, they are convinced, but they look at a number of things in regards to return on investment. They expect better yields. When they pay for the seed, they expect better yields. And of course, better yields translates to higher income. That's what they talk about. They even expect better price, because if they buy the seed expensive, they should be able to sell the grain at some good premium, which is not the case in the market. Usually, whether you use home-saved seed, whether you're buying the hybrid or you're buying the quality seed, the grain in the market is almost the same price. So that is why they get discouraged a bit. They also expect that the seed should be good, should germinate well. The size of the seed should actually be big, which is good for them. And also it will be able to actually weigh more when they take it to weigh. And also, another thing is when they buy seed from you, they expect after sale services. So you should be able to tell them, how am I going to plant this seed? What if I experience issues of pest and disease in the garden? What should I do? So that's some of the returns on investment that farmers actually expect when they buy quality seed.
Great, thank you, Christine. And yeah, it's interesting. I'm not an agronomist, but I assume that for you don't get the same volume of grain from the same volume of seed. I mean, do farmers also factor in a kind of a multiplication factor in their decision making? I feel like it's almost an unfair comparison.
Yeah, true. That is very true. Farmers don't really think that when I buy quality seed, it actually yields much better. So the issue of the price should be in terms, they should actually be able to keep records and do what we call the cost benefit analysis to see how much money they have actually spent. And if I planted maybe say 10 kilos of my maize for 1 acre, how many kilos am I going to get from that 1 acre? Under very good agronomic practices, it should be even over a ton. But farmers don't think about that. They think about, I have spent maybe 8,000 to buy 1 kilo. I shouldn't be able to sell at 600 or 700 per kilo. There should be some better margin, but they forget about the multiplier effect, which is what we need to do, create a lot of awareness. Yeah.
Great, thank you, Christine. Just looking at the audience poll, it seems that almost half of the audience is of the opinion that motivation is what is most lacking, whereas 29% say money and 20% say other. Christine, how would you reflect upon this? Is it money or motivation that they lack?
Based on the experience that I've worked with farmers for really over 10 years, I would want to concur with the motivation aspect. When you look at these farmers, they have the money, but they are not actually motivated to buy the seed. One reason being, if I bought the seed and the weather is not good on a bad season, I lose the money I have bought with the seed. So that is what Astrid talked about, the loss aversion. Yeah, so they also think about that. Yeah, so the issue is really not much of the money, but the motivation.
Okay.
Because somebody looks at the price of grain, the price of the seed, what if on a bad weather I lose my capital investment? So what will I do? Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you, Christine. Now, Astrid, I know that you've been researching this topic and reviewing the literature and having conducted your own research as well. What do you think some of the, let's say, the knowledge gaps or the motivation gaps are in convincing farmers of to invest in quality seed?
Thank you. I think one of the things is what you mentioned is this kind of the multiplication factor. Like you don't compare seed and grain. Yes, they look the same and they take that as face value. But yet, of course, if you plant a kilo of maize, you get 100 kilos or 200 kilos of grain. So using this anchoring and adjustment process, it's comparing two different things. So we also had some previous discussions. For example, if you look at a tomato seed, it's a tiny seed, and then the harvest is like a tomato, and you do see differences between the more local varieties and the improved varieties. So then it becomes much more a business and entrepreneurial enterprise whereby you invest money and you harvest the fruits. So with grains and legumes and beans, it's not exactly the same. So the first amount that you hear or see, that kind of sticks. So I do think there's a lot more education necessary, but in a way that really applies to the mental processes. So really tap into this motivational thinking and more exploratory than just giving the dry facts of like a business plan, because it won't really resonate.
Yeah, indeed. Okay, well, let's look a little bit at that return on investment for a moment. Your research on drought-tolerant varieties of maize in Uganda showed that it yielded far better, and also that the yields were far more stable than other varieties available in the market. So if seeing is believing, I can imagine farmers can assess the return on investment quite easily in that regard. Why then are they still not adopting the varieties?
Yes, thanks. We did a lot of review on the research and also from our colleagues from the CG centers, whereby there is evidence indeed that the yield is higher, but also more stable under different weather conditions. And that even we could see this kind of varieties as informal insurance, because there may not be crop insurance available. So planting this seed will give a more stable yield. But at the same time, I think, as Christine was also hinting at, you have to invest capital up front. And yes, we don't know the weather and the effects of other pests and diseases, so it becomes really uncertain. So therefore, more experience is needed, but also more education. I was just looking at some qualitative interviews that we did, and we see farmers confusing the different varieties, like an OPV and a hybrid. So there's also still a lot of information just missing and confusing farmers, so that when you think as a researcher, you talk about hybrids and the farmer understands the concept, you may be thinking about an open pollinated variety. So I think also more deeper digging is needed to really fully understand this kind of easy answers like the seed is expensive. As we've been discussing, there's a whole story behind it.
And that's indeed what we're looking for today, is advice on research questions, research methodologies, and linkages to perhaps interesting case studies on the ground that you can link to. So to all of our attendees today, please feel free to post some of your advice in the chat column. We will be sure to take note of it. Just looking at what you mentioned, both Christine and Astrid, about a capital investment up front. Christine, what about a continued investment during the growing of the crop? Are there any differences there? Do perhaps improve varieties that also give greater returns in terms of yield? It also require more labor. What have you noticed there, and how does that factor into farmers' decision making? Christine, can you hear me?
Their perception is they always think that improved or quality seed requires you to use fertilizer. Hello?
Yes, sorry.
Yeah, the farmers would usually say that when you're actually going to use improved or quality. Gareth, are you getting me?
Sorry, Christine, there's a little bit of a delay on the line, but we can hear you clearly. Go ahead.
Okay, so I was saying farmers have this perception that when you're using quality seed, of course, definitely, because for better yield, you have to accompany it with the yield enhancers, the fertilizers. But also, they also think that quality seed brings a lot of pests and diseases. So they also keep saying that the fall armyworm that actually surfaced a couple of years back is because of the quality seed. So there's that bad perception that they also have. But apart from that, there are not much differences in regards to the field operations. For quality or home saved seed, it's almost the same. The only difference that comes in is, of course, you have to plant at the recommended spacing at the right time. Yeah, you follow the right agronomic practices, just like even the home saved seed or the other seed or the grain they buy from the market. Yeah, but of course you need to keep checking on it. For better yields, you have to use yield enhancers. Yeah, if you need to get the tonnage that you want from the quality seed.
Indeed. Great. Thank you very much, Christine. I also want to just give a shout out to our colleague Tom at Royal Tropical Institute. Thanks, Tom, for also sharing some of your anecdotes from Burundi. To all of our attendees, please, if there are similar stories out there, we'd love to hear them. Thank you also, Harold Peters. Unfortunately, the time is so short, we won't be able to address all the comments and questions, but we do take note of them, and we will be posting them also to the Padlet if you don't do so yourselves. We'd like to keep the conversation going. Let's talk about these common anchors, these heuristics, Christine, that farmers are applying for in their measure of for judgment of affordability. Looking at beans in Uganda, what are some of the anchors that are being used for perceptions of affordability?
Okay, I would also want to say that a number of our farmers actually have a challenge differentiating seed and grain. So now, when they have a challenge differentiating seed and grain, then the issue of them having to use quality seed also becomes an issue. Yeah, but for an example of beans, farmers actually do plant a lot of home saved, I would say grain, not seed. They plant their home saved grain, which they actually attribute it and also say it is seed. That is because they look at the issue of the price. If I buy my bean seed, how much am I going to sell in the market? But also apart from that, they also tend to say that some of this quality seed that is on the market don't suit their taste and preferences. So now what we need to do as we do a lot of research is, as the new varieties come up, farmers should be given the time to actually be able to participate in selecting what they want, so that they actually have exactly what their preferences, choices are. Yeah.
And Christine, how is this also featured in the the promotion and rollout of quality declared seed in Uganda?
Yeah, what happens is
the experiences there about how farmers perceive the affordability of QDS versus certified versus grain?
Yeah, I would actually say that with the quality declared seed within Uganda, because it's produced within the locality where the community farmers are, the perception is good. They have the trust because they already see that, yeah, it's being produced where we are. And of course, before even the seed producers start producing the quality declared seed, they look at what the community wants in terms of the crop and the variety. So they produce basing on the demand and the preference of the community. So in that particular case, yeah, the farmer is actually okay with that. The price is affordable when you compare to certified seed, because these people who are producing the quality declared seed, what we call the local seed business groups, they produce it on a very cost-effective way. And that also makes the price affordable for the community farmers. And it's even accessible because it's within the locality where these farmers are. And as they produce the seed, they make the farmers aware of the benefits of using the quality seed. And that goes a long way in issues to do with, okay, fine, I can now buy because they are aware of the benefits in terms of the better yields. It's a bit tolerant to drought. It's tolerant to pest and disease. It's my preference because we participated in selecting it. So to me, yeah, the perception is good when you compare the quality declared seed, and the affordability is quite much better because the price is affordable for the community farmers when you compare with certified seed.
Great, thank you very much, Christine. Astrid, I'm just reflecting now. We've discussed the importance of education, awareness raising, and perhaps bridging some of these knowledge gaps. The research that we conducted in Malawi showed that farmers that demonstrated a high level of education and participation in trainings on relevant subjects, and were also able to demonstrate other types of product knowledge related to seed, that they were still attributing quality in a very similar way to those that didn't have as high a level of education. And nevertheless, trust in the source of that seed was the most important heuristic. What challenges do you think this poses to the whole education and awareness creation campaign?
Yes, I do indeed agree that also trust is an important feature of the quality and the motivation actually to buy seed, because even if I go to the shop and I see something I want but I don't trust the quality, because it might come from a certain shop that is known for not good quality product, I'm also not going to buy it. So I think trust, but what I'm struggling to untangle is basically which part is to do with trust and malicious activities of seed sellers. Adulteration, fake seed, counterfeit seed. It's been a lot over in the media at the time I was still working there. And then at the same time, not having the right knowledge. So if you confuse, for example, a hybrid with an improved variety, because the names were never properly explained to you, then the yield you attribute to a hybrid might actually be from an open pollinated variety. So you will never get like the yield which are portrayed on the seed pack or on the commercials, but that you are acting on the basis of not the right information, which affects your trust as well. So I think it's a very fine balance, but of course, the quality of seed itself is equally important in this whole perception and motivational question of purchase of seed. The willingness to pay for something is influenced by motivation, opportunity, but also capability, so having the knowledge. I was reading an interesting paper whereby when we look at the criminal law, the lawyers have to prove like that somebody has had the motivation, had a reason had the opportunity, so having access to quality seed from shops, but also have the capacity, so the skills to apply this the product. So I think it also applies in making decisions about whether you're going to buy quality seed or not. So in that sense, I think these three all have to come together: the knowledge, the willingness, motivation based on your expectations, as well as the opportunity to buy good quality products from shops.
Thank you, Astrid. To all of our attendees, I've posted a question in the chat. This is really the type of input that Astrid is looking for her research in Uganda. What can we do to better understand smallholders' consumer behavior regarding seed purchases? What methodologies are promising, and where are the interesting cases to link to? Please provide us with your suggestions. And thank you, Sarah, for your suggestion. I'd also like to ask James to now cue the next audience poll. The question is, smallholder farmers' perceptions of seed value are most influenced by its which attributes of the seed? Is it its price, its source, recommendation by a peer, grain price, labor requirements, other / I don't know? Please provide your answers to the next polling question. Christine, so Astrid has raised several points on how to try to bridge these knowledge gaps. Trust being an important issue as well. What can practitioners in development, but also commercial players like seed companies and agri-dealers, what can they do to try and improve trust?
Okay, so there are a number of things they can actually do to improve trust. The first one, which Astrid already mentioned, is the quality. Sometimes I like saying that usually when a customer comes to buy, it is what you give them. If they're satisfied with what you have, then they will come back. But if they're dissatisfied, they may go back and then spread the gospel. If you go to that company, if you go to that local seed business, trust me, you will not get value for your money. So the first one is the quality. But apart from that, of course, you know, farmers don't like to take risks. So when they're still starting to patronize your quality seed, they will not buy in bigger quantities. So issues to do with small packs is very important as you're promoting your seed. So we need to ensure that the companies, the local seed businesses, pack their seed in small packs, which farmers will actually buy or customers will buy. And later now, when they actually patronize and they're okay with your product, then they now come and buy in bigger quantities. But also the issue of promotion also goes a long way. As you sell your seed, you need to promote. Talk about the attributes, the benefits, because you don't have to just sell and then the customer doesn't know exactly what he or she is buying. Talk about the benefits. Quality, you need to know the benefits. Even if it's quality, what am I going to gain out of this quality seed? Is it the iron rich if it's for beans? Is it possibly the better yields? Is it the drought tolerant, pest and disease tolerance? So they need to know the attributes. What am I taking? Even the taste and preferences. So that actually goes really a long way. So that really the trust can be. But also another thing, before they introduce new varieties, they should be able to ensure that they actually link with the potential customers, so the customers exactly know this variety that they're actually introducing, is it what we want? So sometimes they do what we call the participatory variety selection within the communities, with the farmers. So it is good as they actually take it up, they know exactly what they're taking up. So even you as a person who is going to sell the seed, you don't really struggle much because the customer has already bought your seed even before you have started selling for them. Yeah, through the what? They have participated in knowing exactly what they want. They have selected, so you now multiply the seed for them because they know the attributes very well. Yeah.
Great, thank you very
much. But also apart from that, yeah.
I beg your pardon?
Yeah, so what I also wanted to say is, yeah, we need to actually, the customers need to profile, the seed producer need to profile their customers very well. They shouldn't forget about the local farmers or the community farmers, because at the end of it all, we want the community farmers to actually use our quality seed. Yeah, so even as they think about bigger companies, other NGOs, the community farmers are very important. Yeah.
Yeah, indeed. Thank you, Christine. And that also reflects what our audience thinks. Source and recommendation by a peer are probably the most two important determinants of farmers' perception of value, let's say. And you've also given some cues for how development practitioners and commercial players can also adjust their strategies to try and be cognizant of this and do better in their promotion and ultimately sales of quality seed. We're approaching the end of the session. I'd like to give the final word to Astrid. Astrid, if there's any final reflections you'd like to make or any requests you have of the attendees, please feel free. That's it from me. So thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Garrett. I think we had a very interesting discussion, and we can see that perception is really influencing seed purchases, whether it's the seed source and what we think of it. The recommendations of peers are really important. And I do think that we see also around us that behavioral science becomes more and more important. Even like this week, there's also a conference going on from the UN to show on how behavioral science is integrated into research. So this session was really to be a teaser to start also thinking about behavioral barriers and perceptions that are influencing uptake of advanced agricultural technologies or quality seed, that we don't only look at dry yields and how the seed is performing, but also that we take into considerations other factors like personal motivation to so that we can move on beyond this barrier of farmers are not adopting particular varieties and technologies. So this area is really developing, but at the same time it's really hard to measure, because how do you measure an anchor? And that's what we are struggling with now. Like, we really would like to see if farmers are taking grain as an anchor for valuing the seeds. But then when you try to measure it, by already mentioning it, you're already influencing the perception. So please also feel free to write to us with ideas on how to take this further, or post your comments in the chat, because we really want to further investigate, and yet we are looking for your perceptions and ideas, so to say, on how to take this forward. So thank you very much for this very interesting session. Garrett and Christine, thanks for co-hosting this. And please, I would like to thank the audience and the contributions as well. It's been really interesting, and I hope to take it forward with you. Thank you.
Great, thanks very much to Astrid, Gareth, and Christine. Really enjoyable, and a pity though that Frank wasn't able to join in the end. Indeed, that brings an end to our session. So thanks everybody also in attendance for your great comments. I'll echo Astrid and Gareth. Please, if you have something to follow up, more than maybe with any other session, jump on over to the Padlet, share your insights there, and it'll really help to contribute to the ongoing research. So now we'll take a break for about 10 minutes. When we come back, we'll have a very interesting look through some achievements and lessons learned from the PSSD program in Burundi. Now, more than any other session today, I suppose this is less discussion, a longer presentation, and also a video to watch. So it's a nice chance to sit down with your lunch, if it's lunchtime where you are, and enjoy the session. In any case, we'll get going in about 10 minutes. Thanks, and see you all soon.